Welcome to 80s horror stories, where the past does not rest, and some things never stop watching. Tonight's story is not about a haunted house. It is about a family that did not sleep, not because they were afraid, but because something in their home would not let them. And what I discovered inside that house was not a ghost. It was something far worse. Something that did not haunt. It watched. The house stood just beyond the edge of a small town in Virginia, in the year 1878. It was not abandoned. It was lived in. But no one visited. No one stayed. And no one ever returned after dark. Locals avoided speaking about it directly. When asked, they would hesitate, glance toward the road that led to it, and then change the subject. But they all agreed on one thing. The Whitaker family had not slept properly in years. Not a single night. I arrived there under circumstances I still do not fully understand. A letter had been delivered to me weeks earlier. No sender. No seal. Just a single line written in hurried ink. We need someone who can stay awake. At the time, I thought it strange. Now, I understand it was a warning. The road leading to the house was long, and unusually quiet. No birds. No insects. Not even wind. The kind of silence that feels deliberate. As if something has made a decision to remain unnoticed. The house appeared slowly through the trees. Tall, worn, watching.
I found the door at the end of a narrow hallway. Plain, wooden, unremarkable, except for one thing. There was no lock. No keyhole. No handle on the outside. Only a thick iron bar, running across it from within. And deep gouges carved into the wood. Not scratches. Not accidents. Marks. Deliberate. Layered. Desperate. The caretaker found me standing there. He hadn't introduced himself. He didn't need to. You shouldn't stand too close, he said. I asked him why the door had no lock. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked at the marks. Then at me. And said something I didn't understand at the time. Because it was never meant to keep anything out. The house had belonged to a man named Elias Varn. A scholar. A recluse. A man obsessed with something he called the echo beneath reality. His journals were scattered throughout the house. Fragments. Half-finished thoughts. Repeating phrases. One line appeared again and again. It pushes back.
Not enough to explain. But enough to unsettle. The kind of details the mind tries to ignore, until it no longer can. The house did not settle at night. Old houses always do. Wood contracts. Walls shift. Structures breathe in slow, predictable patterns. But this house did not behave that way. It did not relax into the darkness. It did not surrender to stillness. It listened. The silence was not empty. It was attentive, aware. Like a held breath that never released. Like something waiting, not for sound, but for permission. And then, I heard movement. At first, I thought it was imagination. The natural response of a mind adjusting to unfamiliar quiet. But the sound came again, clearer this time. Not footsteps. Not creaking. Nothing that belonged to the structure of the house. Something softer. Slower. Measured. Like fabric shifting across wood. A dragging motion. Controlled. Deliberate. Not wandering. Not searching. Moving with purpose. I remained still, listening carefully, trying to determine its source. Above? Below? Behind the walls? No. It was closer than that. Somewhere just beyond where sound should have been able to reach. I stepped into the hallway. The door opened with a faint resistance, as if the air on the other side had weight. It was darker than it should have been. Not the absence of light, but the presence of something that absorbed it. My lantern flickered as I lifted it. Not from wind. There was no wind. No draft. No open space for air to move. And yet the flame trembled. Unevenly. As if reacting to something passing through it. Something unseen. Something close. I took a step forward. The floor beneath me responded with a quiet creak. But it came a second too late. As if it had hesitated. As if it had waited. That was when I noticed them. The family. All of them. Standing in the hallway. They had not made a sound. Had not approached. Had not revealed themselves until I was already there. Just, present. Watching. Not speaking. Not moving. Not even shifting their weight. Their stillness was unnatural. Not the stillness of rest, but the stillness of restraint. As if movement itself carried consequence. Their eyes reflected the lantern light faintly. Too faintly. as if something behind that reflection was holding it back. "You see," Mr. Whitaker whispered. His voice barely disturbed the air, as though he understood something I did not yet know. "We don't sleep." I looked at them again. At the children, at Mrs. Whitaker, at the exhaustion written into their posture, but not into their eyes. There was no drowsiness, no fading awareness, only tension, sustained, endless. "You're afraid of something," I said. It felt like the only explanation, the only reasonable conclusion. Fear creates patterns, avoidance, ritual, wakefulness. It all made sense, until he responded. He shook his head slowly, deliberately. "No." There was a pause. A long one. Long enough for the silence to press inward again. Long enough for the house to feel like it was leaning closer. Then he added quietly, "We're being watched." The words should have sounded absurd. Simple, dismissible, the kind of thing a rational mind rejects immediately. But it didn't. Because at that exact moment, before I could question it, before I could deny it, I felt it, that sensation, the unmistakable awareness, that something unseen was looking directly at me. I turned slowly, expecting to see a person, a shadow, something. But there was nothing, just the hallway, still, silent. And yet, the feeling remained. "Where?" I asked. Mr. Whitaker didn't point, he didn't move. He simply said, "It doesn't stay in one place." The next few nights followed the same pattern. No one slept. No one even attempted to. They stayed awake. All of them, as if rest itself was dangerous. I began to observe them more closely. Their eyes, their movements. They weren't just avoiding sleep. They were resisting something. Fighting it. On the fourth night, I made a decision. I would stay awake alone. Without them. Without distraction. I wanted to understand. Midnight passed quietly. Too quietly. Then, sometime in the early hours, I noticed it. The shadows in the room were not consistent. They shifted, without cause, without source. I stood slowly, my eyes scanning the corners. And then, I saw it. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. Something in the corner of the ceiling. Not attached, not resting, but present. A shape that did not belong. A darkness that felt intentional. I stepped closer. And as I did, it moved. Not away, but slightly, adjusting, as if reacting to me. That's when I understood. It wasn't hiding. It was watching. I felt my breath slow, not from calm, but from something else. Something pressing down on my awareness. And then, I heard it. A whisper, not from the room. From inside my head. "Sleep." The word lingered, soft, almost comforting. But wrong, deeply wrong. My eyelids felt heavy. Unnaturally heavy. As if something was pulling them down. I forced myself to stay awake. To move. To resist. The shape above me shifted again, expanding slightly, becoming more defined. It wasn't a shadow. It was something using the absence of light to exist. The whisper came again, closer, more insistent. "Sleep." The word did not echo, it did not fade. It stayed, lingering in the air, and somewhere deeper than that. Not spoken loudly, not forced, but placed, carefully, as if it knew exactly where it needed to reach. And suddenly, I understood everything. Not all at once, not clearly, but enough. Enough for the pieces to begin falling into place. The long nights, the silence, the tension, the way the family moved, spoke, existed. The family didn't stay awake out of fear. Fear makes people run, hide, panic. This was not fear, this was control. They stayed awake. Because sleep invited it closer. Not immediately, not suddenly, but gradually, with patience, with certainty, as if the act of closing one's eyes was the only permission it needed. I stumbled back, my heart racing now. The realization did not feel like understanding. It felt like exposure. Like something had been revealed. Not just to me, but about me. The room felt smaller, tighter. The air heavier than before. Each breath slower to take, harder to release. As if something unseen had stepped inside. And the space was adjusting to its presence. As if the walls themselves were reacting. Not moving, not visibly, but pressing. Inward, subtly, testing, measuring. I turned sharply and rushed into the hallway. The lantern shook slightly in my hand, its light stretching unnaturally along the walls, distorting the shapes it touched. The moment I stepped out, I saw them. The family was already there, not arriving, not gathering, already present, watching me, as if they had known this moment would come, as if they had been waiting for it. Their expressions had not changed, but something in their eyes had. Not surprise. Not concern. Recognition. "You saw it," Mr. Whitaker said. Not a question, a confirmation. I nodded slowly, my throat too tight to respond immediately. "What is it?" I finally managed. The question felt smaller than it should have been. Insufficient. He hesitated, and in that hesitation, I understood something else. Not knowing did not mean safety. Not understanding did not mean control. Then he spoke quietly. "We don't know." The words landed heavier than I expected. Because they carried no uncertainty. Only acceptance. A pause followed. Long enough for the silence to return. Long enough for that same awareness to settle around us again. Then he continued. "But we know what it does." His voice lowered further. Not out of fear, but out of habit. As if saying it too loudly might draw attention. "It watches." The word felt different now. Not abstract. Not vague. Specific. Active. Present. "And when you sleep." He stopped for a moment. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he did. "And when you sleep, it comes closer." No emphasis. No dramatics. Just truth. Simple. Unavoidable. I felt a cold realization settle in. Slow. Heavy. Final. "And if you don't wake up?" The question left my mouth before I could stop it. Before I could decide if I wanted the answer. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the children remained still. Their eyes fixed, but distant. The silence that followed was not empty. It was complete. And in that silence, I understood. Days passed. Or what felt like days. Time became unclear. Because without sleep, everything changes. Hours lose meaning. Moments stretch. Thoughts repeat. The line between waking and dreaming begins to blur, until you no longer trust either. The body weakens. But the mind remains forced into awareness. Constant. Unbroken. There had been no pause. No relief. No moment where the mind could drift, even slightly. Awareness remained constant. Forced. Sustained. Like a light that refused to dim, no matter how much the body begged for darkness. And that is where it waits. Not in shadows. Not in silence. But in that thin, fragile space where the mind begins to weaken. And something else begins to take its place. The house felt different now. Not in structure. Not in appearance. But in presence. Closer. More aware. Not just around me, but of me. As if my arrival had not gone unnoticed. As if something within the house had adjusted. Shifted. Recalibrated. To include me. As if I was no longer an observer. But something being observed. As if being seen. Had made me visible in a way I could not undo. The walls felt tighter. Not physically. But perceptually. As though the space between them had shortened, just enough to be felt, but not measured. The corners darker. Not from lack of light, but from resistance to it. As if illumination itself struggled to remain there. The silence. More focused. No longer passive. No longer still. It carried direction. Attention. Weight. And somewhere within that silence, beneath it, woven into it, I could feel it again. Not moving. Not revealing itself. Not needing to. Because it no longer had to hide. But there. Constant. Unblinking. Watching. Waiting. Learning. And the thing, whatever it was no longer hiding. Not because it had nowhere to hide, but because it had no reason to. It had already been seen. And once something like that is seen, it does not retreat. It adapts. I began to notice it more often. Not directly. Never fully. But in fragments. In moments the mind almost ignores. Until it can't. In reflections. Where something stood just outside the angle of sight, yet lingered a fraction too long. In corners. Where darkness gathered unnaturally. Holding its shape instead of dispersing. In places where light should have been. But wasn't. As if something occupied that space instead. Always watching. Never blinking. Never shifting without purpose. Always waiting. Not for an opportunity. But for inevitability. Then one night, something changed. Not gradually, not subtly, but completely. The youngest child, the one who had resisted the longest, whose small frame had endured more than it should have, finally faltered. I saw it happen. Not all at once. His eyes began to close. Slowly. Heavily. As if something unseen had placed a weight upon them. His breathing deepened. His posture softened. And for the first time since I had arrived, he slept. It was only for a moment. Just a moment. A single lapse. A single failure in a system built entirely on resistance. But it was enough. The change was immediate. Violent in its silence. The room went cold instantly, not the creeping cold of night, but a sudden absence of warmth, as if something had entered and taken it. The shadows deepened, stretching unnaturally along the walls, pulling inward, converging, responding, and the shape appeared fully, tall, distorted, not human, not anything I could name. It leaned closer to the child, slowly, carefully, watching. I moved without thinking, grabbing the child, shaking him awake. The moment his eyes opened, it disappeared, gone, but the feeling remained. It wasn't leaving. It was waiting. That night, I made a decision. I left, not because I wanted to, but because I understood something I could not ignore. That thing was not bound to the house. It was bound to awareness, to consciousness, to the moment between waking and sleep. And once it noticed you, it didn't forget. Even now, years later, I still don't sleep properly, because sometimes, when the night is quiet, and my eyes begin to close, I feel it, watching, waiting, and whispering, sleep. This has been 80s horror stories. And remember, some things don't chase you, they wait, for you to close your eyes.